On the morning of October 12, 2000, in the suffocating heat of the port of Aden in Yemen, the United States Navy learned a devastating lesson in asymmetric physics. The USS Cole, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer, was moored for a routine refueling stop. This billion-dollar warship was the apex predator of the ocean, equipped with the Aegis combat system, designed to simultaneously track and intercept dozens of supersonic Soviet nuclear missiles in the stratosphere. But the Aegis system was entirely useless against what was approaching across the harbor. A small, cheap fiberglass skiff, piloted by two Al-Qaeda suicide bombers, casually motored alongside the hull. They smiled and waved at the American sailors on the deck. Seconds later, they detonated roughly 1,000 pounds of C4 military-grade high explosives. The kinetic physics of the blast in shallow water were apocalyptic. The water essentially acted as a dense, incompressible anvil, directing the massive, expanding shockwave of the detonation directly into the half-inch thick HY-80 steel of the ship's hull. It punched a 40 by 40-foot hole straight through the engineering spaces. 17 American sailors were instantly killed, and 39 were severely wounded. The crew fought a desperate, bloody, multi-day battle in the dark, wading through neck-deep water contaminated with diesel fuel and raw sewage, just to keep the billion-dollar warship from sinking to the bottom of the harbor. In a fraction of a second, two men in a $500 boat had neutralized the most advanced surface combatant in human history. This is the terrifying, inescapable nightmare of green water warfare. When military analysts talk about naval supremacy, they are usually talking about blue water, the deep, open oceans where American aircraft carriers operate with impunity, surrounded by hundreds of miles of empty space and early warning radar. But green water is the coastal zone, the congested, shallow, chaotic littoral waters extending roughly 100 miles from the shoreline into the harbors, straits, and choke points of the globe. In green water, the multi-billion-dollar technological advantages of the United States Navy are entirely stripped away. The rules of physics, acoustics, and radar completely change. In this deep-dive documentary, we are going to bypass the sanitized naval recruitment brochures and dissect the forensic, mechanical reality of why America's most advanced warships are sitting ducks in coastal waters. We will break down the mathematical impossibility of surviving a massive drone boat swarm. We will expose the horrific, multi-billion-dollar engineering disaster of the littoral combat ship program. And we will explore the terrifying acoustic physics of shallow water that renders a multi-million-dollar sonar system completely blind to a 50-year-old diesel submarine. This is the unvarnished reality of the deadliest tactical environment on Earth. To understand why a billion-dollar destroyer is so vulnerable near the coastline, you must first understand the fundamental limitations of its digital brain, radar. The massive, phased array AN-SPY-1 radar panels bolted to the superstructure of an Arleigh Burke destroyer are miracles of electromagnetic engineering. They blast massive amounts of radio frequency energy into the sky, capable of detecting a golf ball-sized target hundreds of miles away in the clean, empty vacuum of the upper atmosphere. But if you take that exact same radar and point it horizontally at a coastal harbor, it is instantly overwhelmed. The shoreline is a nightmare of electromagnetic clutter. The radar beams bounce off coastal skyscrapers, shipping containers, jagged cliffs, flocks of seabirds, and thousands of civilian fishing trawlers. To the combat computer trying to process this chaotic return signal, a fast-moving, low-profile fiberglass attack boat packed with C4 looks exactly like a rogue wave or a local fisherman. Furthermore, the ship is constrained by its minimum engagement range. The Standard Missile-2, SM-2, interceptors loaded into the vertical launch cells are designed to kill targets 20, 50, or 100 miles away. They require time and distance to ignite their rocket motors, achieve supersonic velocity, and arm their warheads. If an enemy boat or a shore-based anti-ship cruise missile launches from a coastal inlet only 2 miles away, the destroyer simply does not have the physical time or the correct ballistic trajectory to use its primary weapons. The ship is reduced to relying on its close-in weapon systems, CIWS, and crew-served .50 caliber machine guns, essentially fighting a point-blank street brawl using a vessel designed for long-range sniper combat. Our adversaries are acutely aware of this massive technological blind spot. The Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, IRGCN, and increasingly, the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy have spent decades perfecting the doctrine of the swarm. They know they cannot build a ship capable of surviving a one-on-one fight with an American destroyer, so they don't try. Instead, they mass-produce fleets of cheap, highly maneuverable, low-profile speedboats. Some are armed with heavy machine guns and unguided rockets. Others are packed to the brim with high explosives, designed to be driven directly into the hull of an American ship or operated remotely as suicide drones. The threat of a swarm attack is a terrifying problem of pure, inescapable mathematics. In 2015, the U.S. Navy conducted a live-fire test off the coast of California using the USS Coronado, a ship specifically built for coastal combat. They simulated a swarm attack using remote-controlled speedboats. The warship was equipped with a 57 Bofors main gun, capable of firing 220 rounds per minute, and a battery of AGM-114 Hellfire missiles. The crew knew the attack was coming. Yet, despite successfully destroying the majority of the targets, 2 of the drone boats managed to penetrate the ship's keep-out zone. In a real combat scenario, a penetration of that perimeter means the enemy is close enough to fire armor-piercing rocket-propelled grenades directly into the bridge or detonate a suicide charge against the hull. The math is brutally simple. An American destroyer has a finite number of guns, and those guns have a maximum mechanical traverse rate. It takes time for the automated turret to acquire a target, calculate the ballistic lead, fire, confirm the kill, and physically rotate to acquire the next target. If you send 5 boats, the computer can kill them. If you send 30 explosive-laden drone boats simultaneously, attacking from a 360-degree radius at 40 knots, the physical mechanisms of the ship's defense grid simply cannot move fast enough to kill them all before one impacts the hull. The enemy relies on the fact that the United States cannot afford to trade a $2 billion destroyer for 20 cheap speedboats. It is the ultimate asymmetrical cost exchange. The Navy realized that sending massive, deep-water destroyers into the chaotic littoral zones was a recipe for disaster. They needed a new ship. They needed a vessel specifically engineered to fight in green water, a ship that was fast, highly maneuverable, and capable of hunting small boats, sweeping for coastal mines, and tracking diesel submarines in the shallows. This requirement birthed the Littoral Combat Ship (LCS) program. On paper, it was a tactical masterpiece. In reality, it became one of the most embarrassing, catastrophic, and fundamentally broken naval engineering projects in the history of the United States military. The Navy decided to build 2 entirely different variants of the LCS simultaneously. The Freedom class was a sleek, steel-hulled monohull, while the Independence class was a radical, aluminum trimaran that looked like an alien spaceship. To survive in green water, the Navy demanded these ships be capable of sprinting at an astonishing 40 knots. To achieve that massive speed, the naval architects had to make brutal, fatal compromises. They stripped the ships of almost all heavy combat armor. To save weight, the Independence class was constructed entirely of marine-grade aluminum. Aluminum is lightweight and fast, but its metallurgical properties are a nightmare in combat. Unlike heavy steel, which will warp and melt slowly under extreme heat, aluminum loses its structural integrity and rapidly combusts at much lower temperatures. A severe missile strike or a major fuel fire on an Independence-class LCS would quickly reduce the hull to a molten, toxic inferno. The engineering failures of the Freedom class were even more humiliating. To achieve 40 knots, the ship utilized a complex, highly stressed piece of machinery called a combining gear, designed to link the massive output of both the diesel engines and the Rolls-Royce gas turbines into the water jets. This combining gear suffered a catastrophic, systemic design flaw. The high-speed clutch bearings repeatedly failed under operational stress. Brand new, multi-million-dollar warships were literally breaking their own transmissions in the middle of the ocean and having to be towed back to port. Furthermore, the entire premise of the LCS was based on modular mission packages. The ship was supposed to be a hollow truck. You could load an anti-submarine warfare module for one mission, pull into port, swap it out for a surface warfare module in a few days, and head back out. It was a logistical fantasy. The modules took years to develop, went massively over budget, and the physical act of swapping them out proved to be a grueling, time-consuming mechanical nightmare. The ships were left underarmed, incredibly fragile, and prone to breaking down. The Navy built a fleet of highly expensive, unarmored sports cars and tried to send them into a demolition derby. The program was such an abysmal failure that the Navy has been actively trying to prematurely retire these ships mere years after they were built, acknowledging that they simply cannot survive in a modern, contested green water environment. While the surface of the coastal zone is dominated by the threat of drone swarms and shore-based anti-ship missiles hidden in civilian commercial trucks, the most lethal, terrifying threats lurk entirely unseen beneath the waves. The deep ocean is a relatively predictable acoustic environment. American nuclear-powered attack submarines are apex predators there, but the shallow green water is a sonar operator's absolute worst nightmare. The shallow seabed, varying water temperatures, and the constant influx of fresh water from coastal rivers create chaotic thermoclines, layers of water with different densities. When an American destroyer pings its active sonar in a coastal harbor, the acoustic sound waves hit these thermoclines, bounce violently off the shallow, rocky ocean floor, and reflect off the thousands of civilian cargo ships churning on the surface. The sonar return is a massive, deafening wall of acoustic static. Hiding perfectly within this acoustic chaos are diesel-electric submarines. Modern navies, including China, Russia, and Iran, operate highly advanced diesel submarines equipped with air-independent propulsion (AIP) systems. While an American nuclear submarine must constantly run its massive coolant pumps, which inevitably generate a faint, detectable mechanical hum, a diesel submarine can shut off its main engines, switch to battery power, and sit completely motionless on the shallow ocean floor. In battery mode, a modern diesel sub is virtually silent. It generates less acoustic noise than the ambient sound of the ocean itself. It is the ultimate maritime sniper. An American carrier strike group could sail directly over a 50-year-old, $50 million Iranian diesel submarine, resting silently in the mud of the Strait of Hormuz. And the multi-billion-dollar anti-submarine escorts would have absolutely no idea it was there, until the heavyweight torpedo was already in the water. Compounding the submarine threat is the oldest, cheapest, and most devastating weapon in naval history, the sea mine. You do not need a hypersonic missile to sink an aircraft carrier if you can simply sever its keel from below. The green water approaches to critical global choke points, like the Bab el-Mandeb Strait or the Taiwan Strait, can be seeded with thousands of cheap, bottom-moored magnetic and acoustic mines. Modern smart mines do not detonate upon contact. They sit silently on the sea floor, using digital microprocessors to listen to the specific acoustic signature of the ships passing overhead. They can be programmed to ignore the first 10 civilian cargo ships and only detonate when the massive acoustic and magnetic signature of an American Nimitz-class supercarrier passes directly above. Clearing these minefields is a slow, agonizingly dangerous, and highly visible process that leaves the minesweeping ships completely vulnerable to shore-based artillery and swarm attacks. The United States Navy is fundamentally engineered for a Mahanian fleet engagement in the deep, blue expanses of the Pacific Ocean. Their technology, their training, and their multi-billion-dollar procurement strategies are all optimized to fight and win a high-end, over-the-horizon war against a peer adversary. But the brutal geopolitical reality is that the most critical volatile friction points on the globe, the straits, the canals, and the coastal shipping lanes where the world's oil and commerce flow, are entirely composed of green water. In these congested, chaotic, and acoustically blind environments, the technological superiority of a $13 billion aircraft carrier is neutralized by the sheer, relentless volume of cheap, asymmetric threats. The nightmare of the USS Cole was not an isolated tragedy. It was the violent unveiling of a tactical reality that the Navy is still desperately struggling to solve. The next great naval battle will not be fought in the deep ocean. It will be fought in the shallows, where the most advanced warships on Earth are forced into a brutal, point-blank street fight against enemies who have realized that the easiest way to kill a giant is to force it into a phone booth. If this deep, unvarnished look into the terrifying mathematics of a swarm attack, the catastrophic engineering failures of the littoral combat ship, and the acoustic nightmares of green water warfare changed your perspective on naval supremacy, I have a vital request for you. Please subscribe to the Tactical Chow channel. We completely refuse to read you sanitized military press releases or Hollywood myths. We dissect the raw engineering failures, the complex tactical physics, and the hard truths of military hardware. I would also highly appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It acts as the 25mm chain gun that helps this documentary shred the YouTube algorithm and reach a wider audience of engineering and military history enthusiasts. Finally, leave a comment below. I want to know, do you believe the Navy should abandon the concept of sending massive, manned destroyers into coastal waters and entirely replace them with swarms of our own autonomous, uncrewed drone ships? Or is the presence of heavy American steel still a necessary deterrent? Let the tactical debate begin in the comments. And if you are fascinated by the insane engineering required to operate the ships that survive these environments, you need to understand the brutal reality of the aircraft that